Hey, Jamie.
Hi, nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you. Welcome to Healthcare Harmony. Just really appreciate you taking the time to just chit chat today. And we only want to talk about things that are important to you. So, no defined agenda. We're just going to be ourselves and, see what happens as we spend the next 45 minutes or so together.
Oh, goodness. That's awesome. Thanks.
Awesome. So, if you're listening, I want to welcome Jamie Hill Walters to the show. She is currently Jamie. Where are you currently at? What are you currently working on?
Yes, I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Janus Health, and I'm also president of HFMA Texas Lone Star Chapter.
Awesome. Very
Mhm.
excited. Jamie and I met at another organization and became fast friends primarily because we got trapped in a blizzard.
We did. That was the most fun blizzard ever.
I know. We got trapped in a blizzard, had to spend the night in the Denver airport, and just really got to know each other. She's such an inspiration. She's got an amazing story. If you ever had an opportunity to hear it directly from her, she's just got so much insight to share. And kind of in the spirit of collaboration and evolution, sometimes in order for us to evolve as a society or as an industry, we have to first evolve ourselves, which I think is
Hmm.
something that is near and dear to your heart.
Yes.
Um, so, why don't you tell us a little bit about, like your sense of purpose and how you have evolved into kind of defining who Jamie is?
Wow, we only have 45 minutes?
I
No,
know.
I know, right? No. I think it's important and getting older and getting more mature, staying open to new ideas and getting curious is such a blessing, right? Getting curious, whether it's with my friends, family, in business. I always say my favorite leaders are curious leaders, where we're being intentional about understanding what is important to me, what are my values. And a lot of times we have to have life experiences, good and bad, all in between, to really understand who we are. And there are a lot of non negotiables when it comes to who I am as a woman, what's important to me. But one of the biggest pieces of how I learned who I was being of service. And that can come in many forms and fashion. And I know that we're going to get into it as we go through this conversation. But I think as we work through these questions, a lot of the feedback or a lot of the experience that I have, my goal with this, with you, is to be of service and help others. Whether it's someone new in their career, maybe it's someone making a career change, but how can our experiences help the next person? So
Yeah.
that's really the foundation of me,
Yeah.
basically.
And it's
Mhm.
all about paying it forward, right? And lifting others up. And I certainly have experienced that with you. I know that people that work with you and have relationships with you know that that is what you're all about.
Mhm.
Is there a particular area of focus for you right now in serving others that you would like to share?
Well, being involved in HFMA, I will say this. We are really trying to attract that younger generation, and it's different, right?
Hmm.
But we're also seeing this influx of people coming through that want to make a career change into healthcare. How can we help those that are maybe in their 40s looking to make that change? We really focused on early careerist, but I think we're learning we kind of need to maybe redefine what that looks like moving forward. How can we utilize what we have learned to help? And I think one of the things that's important as we recruit and we retain and we get people excited about revenue cycle, first we've got to educate people on what is revenue cycle. We live in this world, and it's always so fascinating to me how many people don't even really understand or know what it is outside of
Hmm.
our bubble. So
Hmm.
the more we empower people and educate them, the more we can get them excited about this type of career. But there are some foundational things that I think are important as we help others, whether that is mentorship. And I'd love further in the conversation to talk about the difference between mentorship and someone who advocates for you
Mm.
and really break that through and get creative. Right now, I have two mentors that are way younger than me. We're working
Interesting.
with multiple generations, you
Uh huh.
guys, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes I need help navigating the younger generation and how I can set them up to succeed, right, in this corporate world. So those are some things that I'm getting curious about right now.
And how do you think that work, kind of mentoring, and we'll stick to the topic of Rev Cycle because that's where you and I,
Yeah.
is kind of where we live.
Hmm.
How do you think that work in getting younger people excited about Revenue Cycle and maybe even being new, developing different leadership skills for
Hmm.
a younger generation in the Revenue Cycle? What kind of impact do you think that can make to the overall, just kind of the healthcare system as a whole?
So this is interesting. I think that it's important that when we manage teams and we're part of a company and revenue cycle, that we share with the team the impact they're making to our communities.
Mm-hmm.
This is a virtual world, right? Picture someone, really hungry to grow and they're working in Excel all day,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, if we can circle back and say, you have impacted 100+ lives just this week by your contribution to this company. Another interesting thing that we found through HFMA working with the younger generation is that they are looking for opportunities to be of service. They want that purpose. So why not go ahead and show them by the work that they're doing in revenue cycle how that's impacting people's lives?
Mm-hmm.
Starting early in my healthcare career, I was on the supply chain side of the business. So I know that when we save, 3, 4, 5 million dollars, right, for an organization, that can help keep services open, that can
Mm-hmm.
help purchase an MRI machine. There's all of these things. So if we are more intentional about recircling and saying, this is what you're doing to help the communities across this country, I really think that we're going to be able to retain more of that maybe early careerist revenue cycle talent, especially on the partner side.
Mm. Yeah, that's very interesting and so true. I mean, we get all bogged down in the tactical, right? Like, go
Hmm.
do these things for, we're trying to move this metric or that KPI or whatever, and don't always take the time as leaders to connect people to that higher sense of purpose, which is so important.
It is. And you have to be intentional about it because, right, we
Mm-hmm.
get so involved and engaged, we're doing our thing. And it's like sometimes I need to take a step back and go, this is a lot of hard work and I love it.
Mm-hmm.
But what am I doing to be of service? We're in healthcare for a reason,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're in
Mm-hmm.
healthcare. We get to be in healthcare. When people say, oh, I have to go to work, I have to go to the grocery store, I have to do this. No, it's a one simple change in a word. I get to. We
Mm-hmm.
get to be in this industry, right? We get to
Mm-hmm.
take care of our families. So I like to be intentional with some of the words too
That
that
is
we're
such a
that we
great
use.
point. Yeah, I
Hmm.
love that. Many people may not know that you are also an artist, and I have
Hmm.
some of your beautiful art
Yeah.
hanging in my home.
Hmm.
Um, and so, very often in revenue cycle, we don't find, or we don't think of ourselves as creative people, right?
Hmm.
And you obviously have this very creative side, and you create all this amazing art. Tell me a little bit about how you bring that creativity to your revenue cycle work.
So everyone's creative, right? You don't have to be a painter like me. You could be a chef, right? You could be a great public speaker. There's so many ways that we can get creative. Um, but what it has taught me is that it's never too late to try something new. I didn't start painting until later in life. My dad was the artist. All that kind of stuff, and I've always loved it. But when I started painting, it was this whole internal self realization that I'm okay whether you like it or not, like you like the art or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it gave me a sense of confidence. But also, being creative allows me to problem solve. So if we're really working through something and I'm like, ooh, I need to spend a day in the studio. I'm going to get up early Saturday morning, spend a day in the studio, and I'm going to really work through this problem we're trying to solve. Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's so funny. My previous team, they would always know I was painting in the studio on Monday when I was like, okay, guys, I've got some ideas. They're like, she must have been painting. There's something about getting outside of yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of reflecting on what problem we're trying to solve so we can be helpful. Plus, um, the art in itself allows everything that I do in my life has a component of service. So, whether the art is empowering women to say, man, it's too late for me to write that children's book, or, oh, I wish I had done this, you still can. It's
Mm-hmm.
okay. What's the worst that's going to happen? Nobody buys
Mm-hmm.
my art. That's okay. You know, how can I use the art to inspire women? How can I use the art to donate to silent auctions, right, to help our organizations? But how can I just make that attainable? But I think the biggest piece is, I've always say it's almost like an etch a sketch. We've had a crazy week at work, stressed. I've got these problems to solve. I'm going to spend a day in the studio and it like clears my mind so I can focus.
And
So,
what suggestions do you have for leaders on how to foster that creativity in their teams and with the individuals on their teams?
okay. So I love creating a safe space for teams. And this is something that I've worked on for years. Everything we're talking about today isn't something that just oof, I knew and I've learned. It is something that I've been intentional about fostering and researching. I love Brene Brown. I really recommend anyone find someone or some resource that speaks to you. And the Rumble session. If you've worked with me before, you know I love a good Rumble. And it's funny, I printed out the exact definition of a Rumble. So a Rumble is a discussion, conversation, or a meeting defined by a commitment to lean into vulnerability, to stay curious and generous, to stick with a messy middle of problem solving, and to take a break and circle back when necessary, to be fearless in owning our parts, and to listen with the same passion which we would want to be heard. That's
That's
a
a
lot, right?
That is a lot. And is great in theory can be hard to do in practice. So
Yes,
any tips or advice you have on how to have a good rumble session?
yes. So let's set some expectations. When you opened the Pandora's box of everyone's idea matters, it does, but we have to set some expectation. We want to create that safe space for people to share ideas because that takes courage. But we also need to make sure in the beginning to say, not all ideas are going to be implemented. Please don't get your feelings hurt. This is not a competition by any means. This is a safe space to idea share. Be sure at the end to thank everyone. Thank you for your insights. If you find some people getting frustrated, my favorite word, one of my favorite words is pause. It is okay to pause. It's okay to mentally take a step back and go, okay, when I'm feeling that fear, anger, worry, resentment, all those types of things, we're humans, right? Let's pause and I ask myself, why? Why am I feeling this way? Um, is this because it's affecting me personally? Or how can I turn this around to be helpful? Let's unpack that just a little bit. So, the important part is too with the Rumble session, always start off with the problem that we're trying to solve. It's fascinating to me that when you get a group of maybe 5, 6, 7 people, there might be half of them that really might not be aligned with the problem we're trying to solve. So any feedback they give might be for another problem. So it's basic. What problem are we trying to solve? Let's create some boundaries, right? Not every single idea is going to be implemented. And then round that out with a nice thank you. Thank you for your courage to contribute.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of, I think I've probably told you this story. I did a leadership immersion program with the University of Washington, and we were together as a group for a year. And one of our sessions was learning improv, and the principle of improv is yes and, right? So you can't reject what somebody else in improv throws at you. You can only accept it and build on it. And so it sounds like part of what you're describing in these Rebel sessions is to not really reject, but continue to build on each other's ideas. And yes, that's a great idea, and we could do this, versus that won't work and here's why, which is where I think a lot of people kind of those sessions start to fall apart, right?
I agree. And I'm an only child, and it took me a long time to learn there was more than just my way of doing things. I'll be honest. Um, but once I had that realization, man, have I grown, right? When it's like, other people may have different ways of doing things, but we get the end results. And quite frankly, sometimes it's more efficient than the way I would have done it. So I also have to open myself up to say, let's be open to different ideas. If the end goal is the same, it doesn't have to be my way or the highway, right? And empower those leaders to think that way as well, right? And it gives people a voice. So,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
so true. And I mean, at Trend, obviously, we are very focused on that collaboration between payers and providers. I'm wearing my, it's better when
Yeah.
we play together T-shirt today, and I just think that that's true in general, right? Like in life, it's better when we play together. It's better when we collaborate. We have better outcomes, whether that's in our personal lives or in our professional lives, when we you kind of start from a place of seek first to understand and then to be understood, so that we can collaborate together. So do you have any examples or stories that you would like to share where you have really seen collaboration drive better outcomes?
Absolutely. So I think, at Janus Health, we are so, with the automation and AI and all these intelligent solutions, it's wonderful that we've established that innovation, partnership, and empowerment. And we're really working together as a team and as a company, and with so many different generations. And I love that. And I keep on bringing that up because I think people should be aware, right? We need to take the time to learn how to work with cross teams, right? Everyone's a little bit different. HFMA, it's been fascinating. Bringing in this younger, early careers generation, asking them what's important and getting them in the room. I think there is something to be said for someone later in their career and someone in mid career. Let's get together and figure out how we can make these solutions work. And I also love it. Now we have decision makers at our healthcare systems. I mean, it is so versatile when it comes to gender, when it comes to age. It's quite fascinating and it's quite fun, right? And making sure that we're giving them a platform, whether it's speaking at a conference, whether it's on a panel, because they can share their experience on how they're working with their teams. A few things, encourage that creativity, but it also comes back to how can we have an impactful Rumble session and bring everyone together in a way that doesn't hurt the organization or hurt relationships. And all these practices that we're talking about, I practice in my personal life too. I
Yeah.
am not a different person at work than I am when I'm in my nonprofit work than I'm in at home, that who I am at home. And I think as women, doing that internal work to get to that point is
Yeah.
is is a big thing. So,
Why do you think that's such a struggle, for women in particular? I know that, we've had a lot of conversations about just, being female, professional females, and all those kinds of things. Like, can you talk about why you think that's a struggle for women to find their sense of self?
well, I think so. Our generation, we have really done a lot of work to make it better for the generation following us. And then the generation before us did so much. I think my mom sent me a text that a few years before I was born, women couldn't even get their own checking account or credit card without a man.
Right.
And you think about that going, oh my gosh, that wasn't that long ago. So let's think about how far we have come. But now we have a responsibility to empower the future generations. And why is it so hard for us? I mean, I can only talk about my personal story. My tipping point, I feel like we all have this tipping point, I hope. I mean, was so I've been sober since 2011. And when that happens, it was really hard. But it all comes back to we have to do the work. And doing the work means getting our internal condition right where it needs to be. Because until we have it where it needs to be, it's difficult for us to be helpful to others, right? So going through that was hard. It was life changing, and it was the most beautiful thing that has ever happened. And part of that, it allowed me to understand where am I resentful, where am I worried, fear, all of those things that kind of get in the way of our usefulness to others. I had to recognize that, work through it, and then always look at that and say, where is this creeping back up? And women also, everything I'm talking about is something I've been guilty of. The P word, perfection. For so many years, I really held on to that perfection. I have to be perfect. Everyone has to like me, all these types of things. And you know what? At the age of 35, I really learned to let that go. And I have learned that if I'm perfect, that there's no room for growth. If I'm perfect, that there's no opportunity to fail. I enjoy when things don't go the right way. It's hard and it's confusing and it's like, oh my gosh. But I look at that and say, oh my gosh, I get to grow through this uncomfortable situation. And sometimes I joke with my husband and say, I haven't had an uncomfortable situation in a while. I really need to find one so I can grow a little bit, because once you experience it, you kind of crave that growth.
Yeah, it's
Um,
addicting.
it's addicting. So I think
Hmm.
with women empowering others, when you get into a position where you can build a team and you can serve on a board, recruit qualified, amazing women,
Hmm.
be intentional in that way to give opportunity. Also, if we have to be spiritually fit, my faith drives everything that I do, and my faith doesn't have to look like yours. But
Hmm.
believing in something larger than me has allowed me to be the woman that I was always meant to be.
Hmm.
And nurturing that faith means that I have to give it away to keep it, not only in that sense of service, but that sense of helping build someone up in their career. And I think that really resonates with people. So as women, I think that if we show that it's okay to be who we are,
Hmm.
it's okay that we are imperfect, it's okay that we have close relationships with other women as colleagues and friends.
Hmm.
And when they're not around, we elevate them,
Mm.
right?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
So that was a lot to say, but I think
No,
it's really important. I think
I
it's
think
important.
I think that is super important, and I know that you are very active in a number of communities. You talked about HFMA
Hmm.
specifically, but can you maybe talk about, how that activity in those communities are really important to how you pay forward the service? And I think probably also specifically in mentoring, that
Hmm.
next generation, whether that's in specifically in revenue cycle or in other areas of life. Could you just kind of talk about the communities that you're involved in and, how that plays into your bigger picture of service?
Sure. And just quickly, I'll touch on, I live in Dallas, and there's a lot of nonprofits related to the recovery community. The Dallas 24-Hour Club, that's our charity of choice this year for HFMA Lone Star. We just had Nexus on a panel, and they really focus on the recovery community, helping mothers and children. And then we have the Magdalene House, which is another recovery community for women in Dallas. And what was wonderful at our summer conference last week, we had the Dallas 24-Hour Club, Nexus, also a professor from UT Southwestern, in addition to Parkland Health on a panel for our health equity panel. So, what's important is raising awareness about those issues,
Hmm.
um, really educating people on the solution around that, and breaking that stigma that this is an uncomfortable conversation to have when, quite frankly, almost all of our families have been impacted by it one way or another. Now, on the flip side, with HFMA, I think that we have a lot of remote employees right now. Clearly, we're in a remote
Right.
environment. With HFMA, there are chapters all across this country. If you, no matter where you work in RevCycle, right, no matter if you're an associate level or if you're a manager, there is an HFMA chapter probably near you where you could get involved with the social events, where you can attend a conference to stay up to date on education. But more importantly, there's a place you can go to have a sense of community within your revenue cycle space. It's all about taking action and being intentional about putting yourself out there. And we also know that people in the rep cycle finance area can be introverts.
Hmm.
We know that. Well, if
Hmm.
you're not an introvert, seek them out and be intentional at these events. Make them feel welcome and part of. So it's on us. I always say, all you have to do is open the door just a little bit, and I'll come through and bust it open and let's make change, right?
Yep.
Just give,
Yep.
it's just about those opportunities. So find out what you love to do, what is important to you. Get involved in an organization. When I am stressed, you know what my medicine is? I'm going to go help someone and get out of my head,
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So those are the things I always recommend, and we can do that professionally and personally. So,
So, when you think about someone that may be listening that has a desire to kind of go on this journey of self discovery, because what you're really describing, what I'm hearing you say, Jamie, is you kind of let go of some perfectionism, some old ideologies, the
mhm.
way that you were thinking about life and yourself wasn't really serving you in a certain way, right? And it was limiting you. And so you kind of went on this journey of self exploration and growth. And sometimes the first step is the hardest. And you talked about a tipping point that kind of shoved you to the other side, which a lot of us have those
Yeah.
tipping points. But if someone is kind of standing on the precipice thinking, I want to go on this journey, I don't know how to start, or I'm scared to start, what advice would you give them?
First, I think finding an organization, right, that means something to you and you volunteer because sharing your experience and what you're going through, I always thought I was so unique. I'm so unique. No one's going through what I'm going through. Woe is me. That's not true. We're not that unique. Find a group of women or men that you trust. Next, find a resource that works for you. Like Brene Brown worked for me, right? The shame and the resilience and all of these things. But there are way more resources out there. So just find ways that you can connect. And then also make sure that you are surrounding yourself with people that are good for you, that are lifting you up, and that you create your sense of community. My sense of community today looks way different than it did 20 years ago. After 2011, and I changed my life, and they always, do you remember growing up, your parents were like, you attract what you are, you attract what you are. And I was like, whatever. Well, you know what? Looking back, that's exactly right. So when I changed my life, the people I started attracting, wow, amazing people, right? Why? Because I did the work. Now, I had a life-changing event where I needed to do the work, quite frankly, but you don't have to have a life-changing event to get there. But what I think is great about this whole social media culture is we have access to information now more than ever. So there are a lot of books, there are a lot of podcasts, just getting help in any type of, group setting, but really making sure the people you have in your circle have great intentions, good motives, and that can mentor, advocate, and have your true circle of people, your people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I love about this conversation is it's all about being human. And
Hmm.
I think very often when we talk about what we do professionally, we talk about the tactical or the strategic or the financial, and we forget that it doesn't matter what business you're in.
Yeah.
We're all human. So the kind of the last question I have for you, and then want to open it up for you to ask me any questions. But the last question I have for you is, how can we bring more humanity into healthcare in order to help drive real, monumental change?
Well, I think it goes back to what you said. We're all human. And whether you're on the partner side, right? I remember early in my career, I would work so hard to put together that PowerPoint, bring in the data, and then we go show up and we meet with this healthcare executive. And all I did was just basically show the PowerPoint, and I was proving to them I know what I'm talking about and all these things. Instead of seeing them as a human, I saw them as someone that's elevated and I have to prove myself. No, as you get older and as you really understand the human impact, what are we trying to solve? What problem are we trying to solve together? What is the why behind this? What's the so what? Right? And really making sure my meetings are not about me and the presentation and this all these PowerPoints I work towards, whatever. It's about taking a step back, pausing, getting curious.
Yep.
Let's come up with a solution together. So meetings with customers, meetings with prospects, I love having them more as working sessions. Let's work it out together. Let's make it about them. And that's something, gosh, a long time ago I learned. I learned the hard way. I think it was, in my late 20s. Um, but if I didn't have someone that was mentoring me at the time to stand up and say, hey, that's really not the way to do it. I understand why you're doing it that way. Let me help you. Um, that takes it back to that human approach. When we go to a conference or an event and you look around the room, everyone is human. People want to feel a sense of belonging, right? People want to feel like when they walk into something that there's people like them that are there, but also we want to attract people that maybe aren't just like them. How can
Right.
we bring everyone together? Because in our world, we're all trying to solve these revenue cycle problems. So, how can we humanize that for everyone? And there's a lot of steps. And part of me is like, yes, we learn through our experience, but if you have the right mentors and advocates in your corner, just like we do with others, that helps get them there faster, much faster.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Jamie, any questions you have for me or any other topics you want to cover before we wrap today?
Yes, I would love to know. So we've, gone through things in our career and we've really worked hard to say, okay, this is how I would love to lead, but we're always open to change and always open to grow. How has your leadership style changed, evolved now that you're in this amazing CEO role? What's the
No.
difference?
Yeah, it's a great
Yeah.
question. Um, I, I think that it has changed a lot for me because it's not just about leading the people. It's an elevated sense of responsibility for the individuals, for the teams, and for just how the organization performs, right? And
Hmm.
so I think where my leadership style has continued to evolve to kind of strike the balance of, how do we work together to deliver results? And also, how do we take care of each other along the way? And so I think from my point of view, it's really working to infuse, to your point, like the human element into all things, whether that's a budget conversation or I'm meeting with a client or whatever. It really is about kind of meeting people where they live, making sure I'm being very intentional about the energy that I'm bringing to the room, and making sure that we're balancing, the human element with what does the organization need, what results do we need to make sure that we deliver on for this client or for whatever.
Hmm.
But so I think I'm always calibrating that, right? It's a lot more understanding what people need from me very specifically in this situation versus like this is my leadership style in general. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, it's like the servant leadership style.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
it's a shift, right?
It
From
is.
where we have grown up in our career, we have, I mean, I can say I've worked for people that weren't servant leaders.
Mhm.
And I think that it's a shift. So, one other question.
Yeah.
There's a fine line with, in your role, I would think too, my role as well. We want to be transparent, right? We
Mm.
want to be transparent. But there is a fine line of how much transparency there is, and also educating the team on what that transparency means. You, what I've studied is that if someone doesn't know the answer to something, their brain can make
Yeah.
up answers, make up solutions, and that leads to sometimes gossip and fear, and really can just unravel. What do you do when you recognize that stuff might be happening, to kind of combat that?
I mean, I think being honest about what you know and when you know it is so important. And it's really hard, I think, when people have very specific questions about what are we going to do about X? And
Hmm.
we don't know yet what we're going to do about X because we're still gathering information, we're still thinking through it, whatever that is. And so being very honest about we don't know yet. We're
Hmm.
evaluating, this, that, and the other before we come to those conclusions. But as soon as we know, we'll come back to you. I think also just having that infrastructure, which I don't think you ever feel like you're nailing it, to be completely honest with you. But I
Yeah.
think having the infrastructure where whether that's a monthly all hands meeting or what are your team meetings, how are you communicating amongst your teams, things of that nature. But making sure that communication is going out across the organization about things that matter to people is
Hmm.
really important. Knowing that, okay, I may have a question today. I don't need to have an answer today because it's probably going to be answered in this forum. I know I have this meeting next week and I'll wait and see if it comes up in whatever that is. But I feel like no matter how much you communicate, you can always communicate more. And it takes a lot of discipline and intention to just make sure that you're answering people's questions. You're, kind of keeping your ear to the ground. What can I do to help you? What information may be lacking? Can I clear up any questions that you or your team may be having? And I think that's just really important. There's just no end to how much you can and need to communicate.
Okay.
And I think it's
my
harder.
final, yeah.
No. I was just going to say one other thing.
Yeah.
Like it's really hard in a remote environment. It's really hard. And, I think about when I worked in an office and I could pop in, in somebody's office and say, can I just talk to you for a minute? Or you could have a meeting physically with people in the room and you could see their eyes, their facial expressions, their body language, and you could make adjustments like right in the room. Like, you kind of seem like maybe you're not getting it. What questions do you have?
Right.
It's really, really hard in a remote environment. I mean, I think keeping cameras on is important. I think, following up and asking, hey, we had a meeting last week, all this information, or yesterday, all this information was shared. What questions do you have? And making sure that you're giving people the right forums, because most people won't raise their hand in a meeting of hundreds and hundreds of people, right?
Right.
They want one or two, and then they may ask the question. So just kind of recognizing the human element of how people think, how they want to get information and share their thoughts and ideas is important as well. Okay, last question.
I miss the days of like getting into a conference room with a whiteboard and the team's in there.
Yeah.
And then, we're really interactive that way. And those nonverbals.
Yeah, so
Picking up on
important.
the nonverbals. Okay, the last question, I promise.
Okay.
What are you doing? Do you bring the company together at least once a year in person? Do teams meet? Because this is a virtual world. So that's what I'm thinking about too. It's like, okay, we need that human interaction. We need to bring people together. What does that look like for you guys in person when you do that?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely aren't doing as much in person as I would like to get us there. I mean, the challenge is, it's not like we're all working remotely from a particular region in the country. I mean, we are coast to coast.
Yeah.
And so, that just logistically is difficult. You can't necessarily assume that everybody has a life situation where they can hop on an airplane and be gone for 3 days or, whatever that may be. So I think, figuring out where you can come together and in what kind of forum. So like our executive team comes together at least once a quarter. And we spend time together. And then their teams come together regularly. And you know what I mean? So we may not be coming all together in an all company situation, but we're trying to get the teams together regularly, certainly the leadership teams. And the hope is that eventually we'll be able to figure out the logistics of bringing everyone together in person. But it's hard. It's hard. It takes a lot of effort.
And it's needed, right?
It is.
Especially for
It
those
is.
teams to get together and have that interaction and do something of service together to build those relationships. We're on the same. I really appreciated this opportunity.
Yeah, I'm so thankful that you took the time to come and chit chat with us, and I'm excited to see and hear all the amazing things you're going to do at Janus. I know that's a relatively new opportunity for you, so excited to see how you put your fingerprint on Janus.
I always say people remember how you make them feel, and
That's right.
we have an exceptional solution product, and working closely with our healthcare partners is extremely, extremely important. So
Awesome.
thank you for the opportunity.
Well, I hope to see you in person again soon at whatever conference our paths will cross.
Yes, for sure.
All right. Have a great day, Jamie.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.